Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about comparison of adjectives. And you can find this in your book on page 190. Okay, so the first thing we need to know about comparison is that adjectives have 3 degrees. Okay, and those degrees are called positive, comparative, and superlative. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of examples of this in English. So the positive form of the adjective is the form that we learn it. And so, for instance, in English we would say tall. The comparative of that would be taller. So you use the comparative to obviously make a comparison. You'd say, I am taller than you. Right? So you use the comparative to compare two things. And the superlative of this form would be tallest. Okay, so tall, taller, tallest. Another example would be clear. So the positive form would be clear, the comparative clearer, and the superlative clearest. Okay, so adjectives have 3 degrees. So tall, taller, tallest, positive, comparative, superlative. Okay, let's talk about how to form these. Well, we know how to form the positive. Okay, so I'll set this up again. Positive, comparative, and then finally superlative. Okay, and so the positive is just the adjective as we learn it. So we use tall, so let's use altus. Okay, to form the comparative, you take the base of the adjective, which would be dropping the US, and you add the suffix I, O, R. So taller would be altior, and that works for masculine and feminine, but if I want to make it neuter, then it would be altios. So altior for masculine and feminine, and altius for neuter. So the comparative actually has 2 forms, and it's declined like a third declension noun. Okay, and superlative, you would add isimus. So it would be altissimus. Okay, and this is an adjective, so it could be altissimus, altissima, altissimum. So superlatives are declined like adjectives. Positive and superlative are declined like first and second declension adjectives, and the comparative is declined as a third declension. It's actually declined as a third declension noun. Okay, so if we're translating these forms, altus would be tall, altior or altius would be taller, and altissimus would be tallest. Okay, they do have other translations, so the comparative could be also too tall. Okay, you can use TOO, or it could also be rather. You could say he's rather tall. Okay, but the basic definition is taller. And the superlative also can have other translations, so you could say most tall, or you could use very, very tall. Those are acceptable translations for the superlative. Okay, let's do a couple of more examples of these. Okay, so I'm going to set up a new sort of diagram here. I'm going to abbreviate this time so I have a little bit more room. So positive, comparative, and superlative. And let's use Claris this time. So Claris, and then the comparative would be Clarior, or the neuter Clarius, and then the superlative would be Clarissimus. And if I were translating that, Claris would be clear, Clarior, clearer, and Clarissimus, clearest. Okay, let's do a third declension one, because we haven't done any third declension yet. So let's do fortis. Okay, it works the same way. The comparative would be fortior, and the neuter would be fortius. Okay, and then the superlative would be fortissimus. Okay, so translating these, fortis would be brave or strong. Fortior would be braver, and fortissimus would be bravest. Okay, so brave, braver, bravest. Fortis, fortior, fortissimus. Okay. Now there is something important to know about adjectives in ER. Okay, for instance, pulcher or misser, right? Or even a third declension one like acer or keller. Okay, there are some third declension adjectives which end in ER. Okay, if an adjective ends in ER, then you add rimus to the nominative singular to form the superlative. The comparative doesn't change. You just take the base and add IOR or IUS for the neuter. But for the superlative, you add rimus to the nominative singular. So, for instance, to form the superlative of pulcher, it would be pulcher and then rimus. Pulcherimus. So it's like a double R. To form the superlative of misser, it would be miserimus. And acer would be acerimus, and keller would be kellerimus. So if it ends in an ER, you just add rimus to the nominative of the word. So let's do a couple examples of those sort of charted out. So yeah, positive, comparative, and superlative. Okay, we'll use pulcher. So the positive of pulcher would be pulcher. The comparative would be pulchrior, because remember, pulcher in its vocab entry goes pulcher, pulchra, pulchrum. So it drops its E out in its base, so you have to remember that for the comparative. So it would be pulchrior or pulchrius. And then the superlative would be pulcherimus. Okay, so if it ends in ER, you have rimus in the superlative, and you don't actually take the base. You just add rimus to the nominative, singular masculine form. But all of these can be declined, and all of them can be declined in masculine, feminine, or neuter forms. The positive and the superlative are going to look like first and second declension adjectives, and the comparative will look like a third declension noun when you decline it. Okay? And that's it for our introduction to the comparison of adjectives, and thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.